The gentleman down there brought it up.
Is that yours? Yeah.
Yeah.
He must
Tell us all
about it and how you made it and what it is and
Tell me about the juicy stuff.
how many times it flew off the lathe. And
But do you have a video of it coming off of it?
yeah, there you go. And again, just to remind everybody that you're being recorded here, so that we will edit it out. Some of the stuff, any of the dead space will be edited out, but we'll capture what you say about your pieces and any of the special tools.
All right. Well, this one's just walnut and maple. Nothing really special. I kind of cut some 1/4-inch pieces, soaked in water, and then I did everything by hand. I didn't use any jigs or anything really. I basically freehand cut this one, and then just use a router to basically match it, like book match or whatever. Glued it together and turned it. Nothing really special with that one. And this one, yes.
Show the crowd.
Yeah, show the crowd
What is it?
and show the camera. This camera here. There you go.
So yeah, it's yeah. I tried. I saw a video on making like actually like a cutting board out of it. I decided to try turning one. Wasn't sure how it was going to work out because the glue up didn't work out super good. I saw it was just a tiny bit off, and so the angles on these pieces didn't work out super great. But it didn't blow up, so that's awesome. And yeah, worked out pretty good.
What wood species are in there?
I got hickory, oak, and ash, and walnut. Sorry. So it's not too bad.
What type of glue do you use? Just carpenter's glue?
Yeah, Type Bond, I think the original. So just whatever I had sitting around, basically.
And there's no stories like it started out 2 feet across or anything like that?
It started out really big, but then once I actually got into a circle, it got lots. And these ones didn't blow up on me, but, which is good.
That's good.
See, I think this one did fly off at one point, but I kind of caught it. So.
Good man.
Good work.
Thanks. All right, the little bowl.
Who's next there? It must be Melanie.
So this is for the beginners. I'm a beginner and I never turned any hardwood, so I chose a piece of birch for my firewood that I had. And I turned this little tiny bowl and I used Fid's hard wax oil for it. And it actually turned out, I was too afraid to go too deep. So it's gonna end up being just a bowl for like paper clips or something like that. But for the beginners, like who have never turned, but have the lathe, it was relatively easy to do. And then on the back, there's, it's inscribed like handmade by Melanie in Alberta, so at Fred's place.
Fred. Who's
Fred,
No, that's Bert over
Bert's-
there near Stu.
at Bert's, just edit that out, please. At Bert's place, Bert has this really cool laser tool. It's a pecker, what is
Laser
it?
pecker.
Laser pecker.
Laser pecker.
And it can laser your logo on the back of your wood pieces. So he demonstrated it by lasering my name, typed it into his app and put it in there. So if you're a beginner, you can do stuff like this. It's pretty easy. And then my second piece is tamarack. Again, it's a piece from my firewood left over from last year. And my brother cut the blank for me. And so I turned it, and as I was turning it, I noticed like the grain is beautiful, but it started to crack. So this was like my second piece that I was doing. And so I got really discouraged and I stopped. And then when I went with Stu and Bert, they showed me how to repair this with a certain glue. So we used, do you remember what glue it was we used?
Oh, there was a test. You're supposed to remember.
I did. I actually went to KMS and bought the glue, but I just can't remember what the glue was named.
2
the name
letters.
of it.
Cyanoacrylate.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, so we put the glue in, and then he sprayed it with an affixer,
Accelerator. Yep.
accelerator, and then I basically brought it home, and I'm going to finish the bowl now. My brother said you should just throw it out, but it's my second bowl, so I'm not throwing it out. So if you're a beginner, you can do stuff like that.
Thanks.
Where's your mallet?
Oh, the mallet. I made a mallet. No, I didn't bring
You
that.
didn't bring it?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, who's next up? There's a little... I'll take one. Yeah, you bet.
Oh, this is a piece of ash. Kind of obscene, but, you know. It started out with a burning operation along the grain lines. The grain lines are quite distinct in this type of wood. And I attempted to color the other lines. And of course, I got a bleed from all of the black stuff, so that didn't work. And I tried to cover it with a different color and still didn't work, so I did black on it. And that's what you got.
You worked.
And the top is brass, or pardon me, copper that's hammered, and it's heat treated to make the colors come out.
Did you hammer it yourself or spin the copper yourself?
Pardon me?
Did you spin the copper on the lathe or hammer it yourself?
Oh, it's make a divot in a hardwood block and then hammer it.
Oh, okay.
You have to have a wooden hammer so that it doesn't score too much.
So did you make your hammer first, sir?
Pardon?
Did you make your hammer first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
It's
just buy it
the
then?
hammer is made out of 3/4 inch steel pipe fitting
Okay.
and a steel handle and then two different radius pieces of wood.
Okay.
You used to smash it with. So.
Should have brought that.
And it works much better if you nail it first.
Okay.
It sounds like there's a video opportunity on that.
Yeah.
That would be wild to see
Should have
that.
brought the hammer with you.
The hanger there.
Very good.
Oh, I guess I'm next.
Chair, so it's easier for people to.
I'm not sure, but I think I might have brought this last month, but I couldn't remember for sure. But anyway, it's just a piece of scrap poplar. I think I got it from you, Bob. It's one of the pieces that came from you, a little end, and it was going to go in the bin, and I thought, I'm going to try and make something out of it. So it's what I ended up with, and I flood coated it. There's a little bit of epoxy filling a void that was in here, and it sat around on the bench for a while, but I just kept picking away at it a little bit at a time, and I ended up with that. Same thing with this piece of Manitoba maple. It was in the scrap pile, and I thought, that's too big of a piece to burn, so I get lessons from him. Anything big enough to turn gets turned, so. And the finish on it, I did some texturing inside, and the coloring is leather dye, 2 colors, red and yellow. And a little bit of Lichtenberg, burn some lines. That's it. The other one that I've got is this vessel. I turned this last year, and I had this idea about putting grape leaves on it. We planted a few grapes last year, a year and a half ago, and I see all these leaves, and I figured I got to try and do something with it, so I want to stick this on. Well, that was a bit of a challenge to do that. It was a hit and miss on a few cases. I think there's a few of them that went on here and came off about 2 or 3 times, so I finally got it down to putting the leaves on when they're kind of green. I was drying them at first completely, and they're too brittle. So you got to put them on when they're soft. And all I've done is glue them on, and then I did flood coat over top of it. And it came out really what I wanted was a crinkly look, and I got it. I don't know, maybe I got lucky, but
What's flood coat? Is that just a name for epoxy?
epoxy.
Is it a brand?
Yes, an epoxy, just a flood coat.
You just pour it
So
on.
just basically pour it on and let
But
it
is
run
flood coat
off.
a brand, or that's
No,
just a
that's
term
a
that you-
technique.
No.
Technique.
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
got it, thanks.
Yeah, and I did some etching on it too. It's just a couple of wine glasses in here, and that's what this is, and that's it.
that a solid block of wood or is it?
It was,
Okay,
yeah, a piece of birch.
okay.
Yeah, and I bored it and hauled it. And it sat for, well, that was a good 6 or 8 months anyway. And I had a foot on here, and I just took that off yesterday or maybe the day before. That's just this week. I finally took the foot off. One thing I learned when I made this, I was going to try it, was I was afraid of it cracking. The bottom is fairly heavy. I wanted it heavy so it would be sitting stable. It wouldn't knock over so easy. So I had it about 3/4 of an inch on the bottom of this for the tenon, and I thought, I was worried about it cracking. So what I did is I parted in about halfway. When I turned before I finished last year, and it sat, the bottom cracked, and it just started to show a little bit of crack in the vase itself. So I was happy with that procedure. I will remember to do that again. If anybody's going to do one of these, this is green when you first turn it, and it's more than likely going to crack. But I felt that that method that I used was successful, so if you guys try it, I hope it works for you too. Because it's frustrating when you put 10 hours into something like this to get it to look like half decent, let it sit on the shelf, and then it cracks where you can't do anything with it. So.
The vase looks really, really good. How was the wine?
If you could drink that, you're welcome to try it. But that's it. Later on, we got our props that we brought. I got a couple
Why
other
don't you
things.
talk about it right now, about how you had to hold that with that?
Okay, yeah. All right, so then let's go back to when I finished this the other couple of days ago. I got to take this piece off. So how to do it, and you got to hang on to it somehow. Well, I got this plug that I make. This is for holding these things, and basically it's a jam situation. This is in the headstock, screwed on, and you jam it with the tailstock into the end, and you turn it down to small, ½ inch or so. Then you just carve that little tip off when it's finished.
How do you make sure that it's going to run through?
I'm getting to that. Okay, when I first put this thing on,
I'm the official heckler.
yeah, he is. He's a good heckler. I use this, when I made this, I made it kind of universal, so I can use it for a number of different styles of vases. I drilled a hole in the end so I can make another plug that will fit in here. This could be any shape that you want. On this one, I didn't finish the bottom properly. It's convex. It's got a crown in the bottom instead of a dish. And I put this in, I had a flat bottom with a piece of foam on it to hold the friction. And I almost lost it. It didn't hold properly. It slipped off to the side. Fortunately, it didn't hit the tool rest, so I didn't bust it all to hell. I was happy with that. But I had a look and I knew right away what was wrong. So all I did was I made a new end, and these are, changeable, so you can put different styles on it. So this one's got a little bit of a dish, matches the curve in the bottom. Stuck that in there, and I was good to go. So something else to keep in mind.
Good idea.
Did you have the center point still in the bottom?
No.
Well, how did you recenter it on there?
I trued it in with, just turned it by hand on the lathe, and I got it real close, Murph. It wasn't too hard. It went pretty good. I was expecting to have trouble with it, but I didn't. As we're talking about things folding, I brought my power arm along. I've shown this here before, but not everybody has seen it, but I find it to be a very, very useful piece. I got lucky to find this. There was a fella working on a carburetor for my Mustang, and he was using one in his shop, and I seen that thing, and I was just Google-eyed all over it. I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And he's seen me looking at it. He says, "Would you like that?" And I says, "Yes, I do like that." "Would you like to have one?" I said, "I would sure like to have one." He goes to the other corner of his shop and he dug this one out. So I bought it. But this is a nice thing about this, is it's so universal for holding something. Lock it, it holds position. I put a piece of angler on the bottom, I can stick it in the vise, or I have a freestanding stand that I bolt it to. I can move it anywhere in my shop. And if I want to work on a bowl or a piece that I'm doing some etching on or embroidering or embossments and stuff, it's on a chuck and it screws onto here. And this one, this adapter that I made will fully rotate. It'll just spin around. I built another one that's solid. It would bolt on in here instead of this, and then it holds it steady. But I can take this and I can turn it in any position, or I can hang it upside down. Some of the flood coating that I've done on bowls, I've had to hang it upside down. This works perfect for it. So if you're looking for something that you can hold your product off the lathe and still have two hands to work with, I think they're a real neat thing.
I think Lee Valley sold something like that, because I've got one at home.
Yeah?
With a 1/8 thread on it, and it was for hand carvers.
Yeah, it's perfect. I think you have one too, don't you, Bert?
Yeah, I bought one off of Amazon. It's a
Yeah.
cheaper version of that, but
Yeah.
the functionality is the same as that.
Yeah.
And I also have the Lee Valley one that's a carver stand, and it didn't give me all the axis this does. So this gives you any direction. And
What's that called?
Power arm. You can just Google it, you'll find it. This style is about $400.
The one I bought off Amazon was 100.
Yeah.
So it's made out of aluminum. It's obviously not as robust, but it's everything I've needed for a lot
So
of money.
for 2 times I use it, and then go to the next technique.
One of the things I've found
Just
is
go to
that
Stu's.
it's better to be looking at it than looking for it.
Yeah.
And now that I've got it, it's amazing how many times I grab it and use it because I've got it.
Yeah.
And that's,
If you're to buy one of these, it comes here to here. This part I built.
You bet.
That's something that, you know, it's easy enough to do. It's just, all it is a bearing, and the base is welded to the center race, and the upper is welded to the outer race. So it turns, but having it solid is probably the easiest way to go.
Frees up your lathe.
Yeah. But anyway, I think it's a real handy tool to have in the shop, and it's worked very well for me. Hey, that's it. Bert's got the rest of the table. He'll be for a couple hours.
we're also on the next stuff there. The little tiny finial looking. Yeah, who's that?
That's not mine.
No, but I said, who is it?
I don't know.
No, that's fine.
Me?
You're the next contestant.
That's nice.
Just a little box. I saw this in one of the books or magazines that I have, and I thought I'd like to, I thought it looked pretty cute, so I thought I'd try and make it. So the first time I made it, didn't turn out so swell. Second time was a little better, but not too much. Third time, again, a little better, but not really good enough. So this is the fourth time, and it turned out to have an issue too. It had a design opportunity with the hole right through the funnel.
It's a vented box. It's a vented box. I like that.
That's what it is, yeah.
It's worth more.
What type of,
It's cherry.
cherry?
Yeah.
And what type of tools, like, are you using carbide bits for that, or are you using traditional
This spindle gouge,
spin? Oh,
and I don't remember what I used for inside there, but
Probably a hunter tool.
yeah, students. So I got tired of making them, so I decided this was good enough to keep if I fixed it up. So I fixed it up. Yeah. And it's cherry, and I think the finish was true oil, if I remember. So that's it.
So when you were making the first versions, what went wrong? What made you give up on
Well, I didn't get a decent fit on the top and the bottom. It was sloppy. One, I broke the end of the finial off.
When you make your fits, which one do you do first? or the tenant?
On this one, I probably, I did this.
That's the tenant side?
Yeah.
What's your finish?
True oil, Birchwood Casey, true oil. I like it, it's hand wipe on, really just put it on thin. I didn't probably put enough coats on this, but you can put 4 or 5 coats on and that's it. For a beginner, that if you want a easy finish, it's not too bad. But really thin coats, so just put it on as thin as you can, wipe it off, let it dry, do it again. Yeah, any more heckling?
No, that's good. Didn't want to heckle you, Ron, that was great. Those were
So
fantastic.
you're using like regular size spindle gouge for that? Like just a regular size?
Yeah, 3/8.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. Whatever cuts, whatever works.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I guess it's me. So this is my brother's mountain ash tree, and he was pruning it last spring. And we do well, since I've been working with my lathe, I do a Christmas ornament for the extended family. So I make 25 or 30 of these. And so just, you prune these, and we got branches that big, and I figured, okay, I'm going to try that. So, hardwood and sapwood, or whichever, the other way around, I get just turned it green. And so if you look really closely, as it dried, like not all these little grooves from my parting tool are the same, because it just twists and moves a little bit. And then once it was dry, I just literally by hand, just a little sanding, and then just sanding sealer to put it on, and there you go. So, the first 4 or 5 took a little bit of time, and after you do 4 or 5, the 20th and 25th go way quicker. And like I said, all this was just the parting tool, and then just parted it off and threw it in a cardboard box for 2 or 3 months, and once it finished moving and drying out, then we were good to go. So that's that one.
What do you use for sanding sealer?
I'm sorry?
What do you use for sanding sealer?
Just that Zinsser sanding sealer.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing, it comes in a gallon.
Yeah, it's $100.
Right? And so, but what I actually did is I bought, have you ever seen those stop loss bags?
Oh, yeah.
So I put some in there, and I've had it, and I'll talk about this next thing, but I've had it since 2019. It still works like a dime. And so, or if you go to a paint store, I live in Leduc, and the paint store there will sell you, instead of the whole gallon, they'll sell you a liter, so they break it down. So, and it works pretty well. Then this is, again, some people get Christmas presents, so if you belong to the American Association of Woodturners, they have a newsletter that comes out, and this is it's called a kendama. It's just a Japanese toy, and I'm not really very good, but then, look at that! Oh! Anyway, that's how it works, and you're supposed to be able to land it there, and then you flip it over and you land it there, and then you flip it over and you land it there, and then once you get really good, then it goes there. Anyway, so all my kids got one of these, and they're all adults, but they put them on their desk at work. And so I made them the top last year, and I made them a different top the year before. And they say, everybody who comes, they want to play with your toys. so that's what it is. And so I didn't turn this because I don't want to learn how to turn spheres, because I couldn't do it. So this is just a Lee Valley $1.50 sphere type of thing. But I did turn this. One of the challenges, obviously there's 2 pieces, was to turn this. So 3-jaw chuck here, you turn most, but then how do you hold this end? And one of Bert's tricks is, you get a piece of ABS pipe, and you cut a little piece that goes inside that, and that way your chuck jaws don't mar the surface, right? And so I got 1.5 inch ABS pipe, cut it about 1/4 inch thick, put a slice out of it, put that inside my 3-jaw chuck, and then squeeze this end in, and that held it, and then I was able to finish the other end. So, and it worked really well. And there's no finish. This is just scrap maple that is in my bin, because we all have scrap maple, and so that's that one. And the last one I brought is this one. So I keep, for those of you who haven't never looked at the YouTube thing, this is called a dizzy bowl. And I figured, okay, I've watched enough YouTubes, I'm gonna try and build one of these. So I actually did just finish this, what's today, Thursday? Finished this Monday. And so I thought it turned out pretty well. And do you wanna know how I built it? Do you care?
Yes.
Okay, so I started off with a blank. No, I had a bunch of scrap hardwood pieces. So this has the Duke, yellow heart, maple, purple heart, wenge, walnut, mahogany, red oak, and bloodwood in it. And so I cut a bunch of pieces that were 10 inches long, 1.5 inches thick, and then just a variety of different widths. So some of them are 1/8 of an inch, some of them are 3/16, some of them, and then you glue them all together. And so I ended up with a blank that was 10 inches by 10 inches square, 1.5 inches thick, with a bunch of these ones like this. Okay. And then you take it to the bandsaw. My bandsaw only has a 6-inch capacity, so I had a 5-inch piece and a 5-inch piece to glue the last one together. And then set my bandsaw at 1/4 of an inch with a brand new blade, and then ran it through. So I ended up with a bunch of slices that were 1/4 of an inch thick. So I had 4 of them with my 1.5 inch thick by the time you run things through the planer and stuff like that, and through the sander. So every time I cut, I took the big piece that was left, ran it through my drum sander. So I had a smooth surface, then took another 1/4 inch off, another 1/4 inch off, and then I ran all these 1/4 inch things through. So on the unsmooth side, so I had 2 smooth glue surfaces. So now I have 4 1/4 inch pieces. And then I scribed a circle. So imagine that I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And one circle has a circle that's 9 3/4, and then 8 3/4, and then 7 3/4, and then 6 3/4. And then the next one, you change it so that it's, instead of 9 3/4, it's 9 1/4, 8 1/4, 7 1/4, 6 1/4. And then the next one is 1/2 inch less, and then the next one's 1/2 inch less. And then you glue them one on top of the other. So this is each one of those layers, glue, 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 and it slowly gets bigger, 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 inch wide, all the way down, but they're like that. And then you also, as you glue them together, because you have all these little pieces, then you just offset them. You pick something. So what I did is I think I picked this yellow heart, and then just offset it enough so you end up with the twist in as you go. So each ring that's glued, you just offset a little bit so you end up with swirl. So then when you're done, you spend forever waiting for the glue to dry. And then when you're done, you put it on the lathe, so it's spinning. And then you start on the inside, they've all got a little corner, you just make that as smooth as you can as it's spinning. And then while it's on, so on the inside, and I learned this trial and error, but on the inside you go from top to the inside, and then on the outside it's still spinning, but you come this way. And then you end up with something that looks like that. And then, again, you watch the YouTubes, and I'll tell you the name of the guy who kind of inspired me and whatever else. And they talk about using Yorkshire paste. Have any of you guys ever tried Yorkshire paste? So I said, okay, I need to try Yorkshire paste. So Amazon sells Yorkshire paste. So I sanded this to 220. And then Yorkshire paste has got a really fine grit in it. So, and you can make your own, but I figured, screw that. I'm not making my own, I'm gonna buy it. So, and it's got a little bit of an abrasive in it that you really can't feel, but kind of. And apparently if you sand to 220 or 240 and then you use this until it's all gone, you end up with a sanding surface that's about 1,000 grit, which is pretty good. And then, again, if you watch YouTube and things like that, all these pros, they tell you, oh, you should use microcrystalline wax. And I said, okay, I've watched enough YouTube, I'm gonna buy some of that. And Amazon also sells this, coincidentally.
How about that?
And so I use this, but it was dead easy to do. And there's once it was on, it was on. And so the finish of this was sand to 220, sanding sealer, and then sand again to 220 with just normal sandpaper, whatever you use, and then Yorkshire grit, which apparently takes us to 1,000 or somewhere in there, and then just this stuff. And as soon as this stuff's on, you know, you spin it with the lathe, and it's kind of a friction thing, kind of like Osmo is, only different. And the advantage of this apparently, and I'll tell you in a year, is that it's not supposed to hold fingerprints and stuff. So apparently museum quality stuff, you know, is they use this wax stuff. So again, I've read about it and I've heard about it and watched YouTube and the Theo guys, if you watch those record power things, and that woman they had last week, the Tiny Turner person, and they're always talking about Yorkshire grit and this wax, and I figured, okay, give it a try. And so far so good, until I drop it or the grandkid does something with it. I don't know. Anyway, so there you go. So, but yeah, if it stays together, then I'll make a few more, and that might be the Christmas gift next year. We'll see.
So how many hours was it to put all the pieces together? Like roughly, like how long did it take you?
Not forever. Like probably it was less than a day. You know, and I have a bunch of scrap, right? You know, which we all have scrap. So, you know, you have a little piece of Purple Heart that's this wide by this long and this thick. Well, that's what I use. So I ripped it 1.5 inches and then turned it this way on my table saw and ripped it into, you know, 2 1/8 or 2/4 inches or whatever. Ran it through the band or the drum sander, so it was a smooth glue surface, and then just kind of put it this way until I was kind of happy with. And this one in the middle is Wenge, and so that one that's where my center line was. And then I tried to make it symmetrical on both sides. And so Wenge in the middle, and then, I don't know, maple and maple. And then yellow heart and yellow heart. And then whatever, mahogany and mahogany. And tried to have equal widths on both sides. And then, like I said, you just, as you're gluing it, you just little turn every time, and you end up with that twist, and it worked out pretty well. So yeah. So, any other questions or anything?
I have one. Is that microcrystalline wax
Yep.
food grade? Can you have food in it?
You can, but I'm not sure if I'm going to put all this time in. I want it to be food grade.
Definitely don't put it in the
yeah,
dishwasher.
typically it's for more decorative stuff.
Yeah.
It's everything you read. It's kind of that. You know, you can use an oil base, like if you're looking for food grade, you can use, you know, an Osmo oil or any kind of an oil-based thing. Once it cures, is theoretically is good. So there you go. Any other questions or anything? So that's all I brought.
Who's next?
Here, I'll go. Who's next?
Oh, that's mine, so I'll wait. But who's got the week stands?
Oh, that's mine.
So, I've had this sitting on my table out in the house for about 6 months now. It's finished. Kept forgetting to bring it, so I got zebra wood on the top. Pretty sure that is maple. And Tarara for the base. I wanted something good and heavy for the base because a friend of mine dated a gal who had a wig for various reasons, medical, and I knew when she put it on, they can be quite heavy. So I wanted a good, solid, heavy base for that. Just to, and then it's, finished it. Oh, wipe on poly. It's my first use of wipe on poly, and it turned out quite nice. I really like how smooth that got. Member of my Scotch club is having a second, so I made a little rattle. Fourth rattle I've made. There's been, I'm getting to that age where there's grandkids popping up now, so I thought, well, I better make that, and that's figured bird's eye maple with a beeswax finish. So, and black eyed peas inside.
Did you split it or rive it and then glue it back together?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, if you take a look at the top, you can see that you can just see the faint glue line. And it was actually 2 pieces that I'd, again, scrap, rummaging around like, oh, I got a piece of that. So you can see I glued 2 pieces together, turned it around, parted off one end, hollowed it out, then monkeyed around, chucked up the other end, and then turn it, fit, turn it, fit, turn it, fit, just till I got a nice, just a pristine fit. CA glue the top. My big concern was I wanted to use it thick because I didn't want it to run, and all of a sudden I have a block of black-eyed peas not going to run. So, yeah, that all is set, and then a beeswax finish. I think all is said and done about 3.5 hours into this.
So a baby can put that in their mouth and there wouldn't be any,
Yeah.
no problems, 'cause
No.
it's beeswax.
Yeah, that was the whole goal, because I know kids,
Yeah.
mine drool a lot on anything she could get her teeth on. And then I had a little piece of terroir, another little piece of terroir, so I turned a little bowl, and it didn't look quite finished, so then I made a little walnut lid for it. Again, all scrap material. My first trying, I've had a hollowing tool for about 2 years, and I've been terrified to use it. I've tried it a couple of times, and it was not working well. So I thought, I'll make something small, so if it catches or comes sailing off, the damage to me will be minimal. So, but again, just a neat Danish oil finish, and it just turned out pretty okay. My wife won't let me get rid of it, she wants it.
Thanks.
Who's got the segmented chalice there?
Bob the segmenter.
I made this chalice as open segmented. And as some of you are aware, lately I've been playing with open segmenting to see what the limits of it are. But just for your information, this ring is 8 segments. This ring actually has 32 pieces of wood in it, but it is actually a 16 segment ring, as all of these are, and then it's back to 8 segments. And what I do with these to get the 32, I had the 16 segments. I made a jig and put a saw cut in each joint. Like each color here was glued to waste wood. So I would cut through only the colored wood, the waste wood would stay whole, so the ring is solid. And then I made one more cut right in the middle, and that's how I got the 32 segments out of the 16 segment ring. And the finish on here I'm a little disappointed in. It's Danish oil and it's yellowing on me, more so than Osmo would. But I didn't feel like taking a paintbrush and trying to get Osmo into each one of these segment openings. So what I did is I just took this Danish oil, dumped it into a bowl and spun this through it. That was it. On the lathe, crank it up, spin off the excess. That was it. We're done.
Did you wear your face shield, Bob?
Well, I did better than that because the first time I spun something on the lathe, it's all across the ceiling. So now there's a shield goes around it. Zing, and off it goes. But no, it was enjoyable to do. You've got to be pretty careful here because if you cut this too fast, these can collapse on you fairly quickly. Any questions?
What type of wood is it, did you say?
Well, it's all scraps. It's scrap maple, walnut, gum wood, and birch, and then reversed.
And then what did you use to turn it? Like what tools did you use to do just your bowl gouge?
Just spindle gouge.
Oh, your spindle gouge, okay.
I have one that I have kind of a unique grind on, and it just about does everything that I want to do. This, when you're cutting this, I use the same tool, but I make sure that it's really sharp. And turning at a pretty good rate, probably about 2,000 RPM. And just very, very small cuts.
Very nice.
That's it, I'm up now, huh? You're up.
Now you know the limitations, right?
Well, so we'll start with the easy one first. I've got a quilter friend And I asked her if there's any tools that she uses as a quilter that would be useful. And she showed me a picture of something for putting bindings on quilts. This lady's done quilts for like 30 years. She's made 50 or 60 quilts. She's got lots of great grandchildren now. She's making new baby quilts. So I made her one like this, only it had walls on it and a slot in it. We've seen a demo of this on Lancaster Coffee Hour, so I seen it and I had to build it. Well, she took that one that I made with the walls on it, and it had a spool that it works. She loves it. She won't give it back to me. So I'm taking this to her so that I can give this to her and get her to test it for me. Put her banding on here and see if these pegs will do the same job as the little walled one. So I can take the spindle out of the walled one and fix it, because it just drives me nuts. She says, oh no, it works. It's a little tough to load, but it works. I said, I can fix that, but she won't let me have it. So I'm going to take this to her. But this is just a simple piece of wood, a little piece of steel rod, and another scrap piece of wood. And it's got a slot in it. So how do you cut a slot on a round piece of wood after it's turned without losing a finger? So this part's easy, pretty straightforward, just a drill and a few pieces. Putting the slot in here, I've got a jig. I've had this jig for years and years and years. It's just a 3/4 inch bolt, and it's got an adapter on. Right now it's got a 1'8" adapter that I can screw a chuck on. I've got an 1¼ 8" adapter from my chucks. I screw the chuck on here. The chuck is grabbing on this burn ring. I've got a set of jaws on my Vic Bar chuck that are, I think they're called shark jaws. They stick out about 1.5 inches. So this can fit inside the jaw. The jaw grabs on this little burn ring so it doesn't make a mark. My jaws are 35 millimeters, so this is almost perfect circle. So I screw this onto the chuck, and then I line this up for grain in the chuck, and then this is on my bandsaw. And I line this up to the bandsaw, put my fence up against here, and just make a zip cut. And my hands are back here, and all the action's happening here. I just have to make sure I don't run it right into the chuck. Even if I did, it would just screw up the bandsaw, but it wouldn't hurt me. But this thing has been invaluable, because if you're working with a bandsaw on round wood, you need to be able to secure the wood without your hands, because it's a bandsaw caught or on a knot and flip this off, it doesn't matter, I'm behind here. So if you have a bandsaw, build yourself a little jig that you can screw your chucks on when you want to cut round wood. It also has a hole in the bottom, and that was specifically to try making the kinds of boxes that have two kinds of wood in on an arc. So I had a piece of wood, this is the 3/4 inch hole. I put a 3/4 inch dowel and a piece of plywood, clamped it to my bandsaw, and I just ran, the block of wood was on a chuck, and I ran it through the bandsaw and cut whatever arc that was. I took another piece of wood, did the same thing. You can cut it a 1/2 inch thick or 3/8 of an inch thick, whatever thickness you want. Now the arc is exactly the same on both pieces. You just glue them back together. And then when you turn it, you've got a project that has a curved band in it. Because once it's glued together, the lathe doesn't care, the wood doesn't know that it's bent or curved. It just looks really neat. But this thing has been invaluable for making small things and for big things. And then talking about segmenting, I've got to give credit to Bob for segmenting. The first one, I brought the first segmented thing a couple of meetings ago, where I followed Bob's instructions, but not really. I thought I was following the instructions, but I used a whole bunch of different woods that were different thicknesses. Then I made all these rings, and I was following, make all these rings, and everything was going great. When the rings are different thickness, and you've got 8 pieces here and 8 pieces here, when you're trying to put them together, they don't fit. So I ended up with an egg rather than a ball. So I was talking with Bob, and we talked a little bit, and he says, oh yeah, well, if you make a drawing, you can actually go back to your drawing and reference. Well, I did make a drawing. I took a pencil and scribbled them like this, and I thought I had it figured, but I didn't know at all what I was doing. So I went down in the basement, and I sat down with a clipboard full of paper, got some graph paper, and I followed Bob's instructions. And you know how easy it is to draw a circle, and draw another circle inside that one. There's your wall thickness. You put a vertical line on it, and now you can measure every piece to make a perfect ball. That's a segmented ball.
You use the paper that's got the little squares on it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's 16 rings in there. But I made sure the first thing I did is I cut all my stock the same thickness. So I have all the same thickness, and on my drawing, the center ring has to be 5 millimeters different than all the others. So I made a piece of stock that was 5 millimeters thinner than everything else. And I proceeded to make all of the rings. And so Bob, I'd like to give you my clipboard. I don't need it anymore. I've got a whole bunch of them now. But I thought it's so handy. I have every project I go up to the shop now. I go out of my office, I put a project on one of those, and I take it to my shop, and it's laying there. So when I'm working on the lathe, if somebody phones or I have a brain fart, I just go back and look at the drawing, and I can measure it to make sure. I didn't bring the template with me, but when you make a ball, you have 2 halves. So I have a foot here and a foot here. I know exactly how big the inside is. And that's another comment that Bob gave me, and I took it to heart. He said, well, if you make a template, and I thought, what a perfect idea. I made the template to match the drawing on my board perfectly. When I turned the inside, I just turned it to match the template. No more measuring. Match the template on this half, and when you're doing the other half, match the template. Then when you put the 2 halves together, they're perfect. The inside is absolutely perfect. I can take this lid off, and you can run your finger in and find out that there's no difference in the seam. And I know that for a fact because you'll never get your finger in there. But the beauty of it is too is that once these 2 pieces fit together, you know what the inside dimension is. Then when you turn the outside, I turned the center down to what the drawing told me it should be. Put a caliper on. Turned it whatever that value was. Doesn't matter what the value is, it's what's on the drawing. And then I moved over 1/2 inch, and I turned here, and 1/2 inch on this side. Same caliper setting. Just wiggle it back and forth until it fit. And I went all the way around the ball, and it took me about 15 minutes to have a ball. And it just, I can't thank you enough, Bob. It was just an eye-opening experience to be able to do that. The first ball I did all by eye, and it was not anywhere as close to me. Yeah. So anyway, that's the baseball. I now have a basketball, a golf ball, a baseball, and I just finished this one last night. Anybody know what it is? It's almost 300 cubic inches. These are cremation urns. So they're sports-inspired cremation urns. This is a cremation urn that holds about, I think this one is, I physically measure how much is inside it by filling them with pellets and then measuring it. This one I think is 175 cubic inches. This one's 300. This is a challenge because this is 22 rings, 12 segments each, so it's 264 pieces. And I had to turn it like this with a foot on each end. And then I had to take the ends off because it's got to be a football. So I had to take the ends off.
One end is easy.
One end is easy. I didn't bring all the jigs that I had to use to do that because they were too big. But I ended up making a donut chuck. So I had this end held on the headstock, this end held on the tailstock. I use a chuck on my tailstock as well. And in order to do that, I have an adapter like this, 3/4 10, to go on my live center, and it's 1 1/4 8, so I can screw a chuck on. So I have a chuck on both ends of this football. And I take this end down, the first end down to about 1/2 inch. And I pull the tailstock away. Well, first I had to put my steady rest on. So I took the tailstock away, put my steady rest on, put this other chuck back in, and then took this down to, I think it was less than 1/2 inch, because the steady rest is holding all the weight. And yeah, and then I was worried about taking it right off because then it might fall. So I took it down as low as I could, took the steady rest off, and then I built a donut chuck. And the donut chuck would, I had to take this off of my chuck, put a piece of wood with a hole on it that was bigger than the chuck, and then put this back in the chuck, and then hold this piece of wood up against here, and made a donut piece on here with 4 long rods. So then I could squeeze the ball against this piece of wood and this piece of wood, and this is still held in the chuck.
Must have been easy
Then I
to
could
set.
finish this. So it was a little scary. I was only doing about 300 RPM because I was worried about it not being really secure. But that worked real good. So then I got to turn around and take the other end off because they're just sacrificial waste blocks. How the hell do you hold this to take this end off? That was a bit of a challenge. I had to do a little bit of brain busting to figure that one out. I ended up making a donut chuck and a jam chuck. Yeah, I ended up putting a jam. I had to make 2 jam chucks. And it took about 4 or 5 different processes in order to get this to be a football. Same on both ends. Once I had it like a football, then I had to make a base for it. Well, the base was easy. That's just a block of wood. Turn the profile inside this block to match this point. But if you ever watch the kicker, when they go on the field, they put it on a tee. So I needed some way to make it look like a tee. And you'll notice the ball's not sitting perfectly straight up and down because when they kick it, they don't put it straight up and down. So I had to put this on an angle, and then I still have to make a hole in it because there's no way you can get ashes in there if you don't have a hole in it. So I was trying to figure out, I found the angle, set it up on the bench, the angle all looked really good. I'm wondering how can I do something so that I can mark the underside so I can know where to put it. And I think, well, that was another one I thanked you for. Maybe not even realizing it. You use hot glue a lot for loading. So I had this thing sitting on the bench, just like that. And then I remember seeing Bob was trying to glue the whole thing, and I thought, well, what the hell? So I hot glued here, I hot glued the other again. I put 3 dabs of hot glue on the bottom. And lo and behold, I could pick it up and it was perfectly solid. I took the plug out, and when I made this ring, I made a cavity groove that matches, that fits on the wall, and I filled that cavity with epoxy. So now this piece is epoxy to the football. Now my challenge was how do you get rid of the hot glue? Ethanol, smokeless fireplace fuel. In the States they call it denatured alcohol. And in the UK they call it methylated spirits. In Canada you can't buy denatured alcohol. You can buy ethanol, it's called EWG. It's called smokeless fireplace fuel. It's pure ethanol. Dab a little bit of ethanol on hot glue, 5 minutes later you grab it and just peel it off. If you try and take the hot glue off without doing that, you can actually pull the wood. Hot glue sticks and pulls the grain of the wood out. It's amazing. Hot glue is great. Oh, when I made these, I thread the bottoms with a threading jig, so I had to make a little tool to make it easy to lift them in close. That's my threading jig. I love my threading jig. You know, every urn I make has little threads in it. How many people have ever made earring holders? With a stand, a post, and with this on top, and roll up the holes in it, hold earrings? So I made some for my granddaughter and for some other friends. And the challenge is, how do you drill all the holes around the disc that's about 4 inches in diameter? I watched a fellow from the UK, his name is Steve Jones. His YouTube channel is Woodturner 21.
Yeah.
He's a professional woodturner. He doesn't talk much in his videos, but he shows you how to use his tools. He uses a skew a lot. And he made one of these earring holders. And I must have watched that video 5 or 6 times, not to see how to turn the earring holder, but to see how the hell he put the holes in. So I looked and I finally went through his video, stopped frame. Every time I see him, when he moved, I tried to figure out what he was doing. And what he ended up making is a piece of board, a little piece of 1/4-inch plywood, and a post in the middle. Defines their metric hole. If you take XL and do a pie graph, and if you want 24 teeth, you make a pie graph with 24 single line on XL, print it, do it to a piece of paper, go to your bandsaw and you just cut straight in on the lines 24 times. This angle is not critical. This angle doesn't care. It's the flat. It's the same distance from each one as a index. This little pin on the bottom fits in a hole here. And this little 1/4-inch piece of plywood, flatten this around. Set your piece of work. This one was just a practice piece to make sure that it actually worked. Just a piece of MDF. And I made some out of old CDs. Just drill holes in the old CD and set it on a piece of wood with a little video on top. And it's kind of a funky looking little ring holder. This one is an actual piece of wood. This wood glue. Okay. That's an important piece. This particular piece has a 3/8 hole in it. Fit on the tenon that goes through the finial. This one here, the wood busted off, but I use it as an example. But the pin that holds this together is a 6mm metric hole, just because I have it. Well, this hole is 3/8. So how do you line it up? Well, I happened to get the insert that this came with. I happened to take a 3/8 hole. I just cut a piece of plastic off. So all I know, a piece of plastic with my bushing that automatically centers the gearing piece. When I hold all this stuff together, it's perfectly centered. You set it up on the drill press. You line your drill press up. I put a groove on the wood, so when I line up the drill press onto that groove, I tighten this down so that this piece of wood is solid to the indexer. And it doesn't matter where you start, as long as you've got the gear pulled against the plywood. Make your first hole, make the second hole, and go all the way around. Simple, like falling off a log. I made one of these without a jig. It took me about 4 hours. It took me about an hour and a half to make the jig. And I think I made that day, when I was making those, I probably did 8 or 10 of them for friends and family. Making a jig, if you're going to make more than one of anything, it's a good idea to think about how to make a jig. It might help you out. Talking about jigs, I make a lot of these things that fit on my tailstock and my headstock. So my lathe is 1 1/4 8. So this is just a jam chucker. I reshape this as I need it, but I can screw this right onto my lathe headstock. In this particular case, I doubled it because I needed a way to hold this so that I could turn it to get something true. So this bevel kind of roughly fits in the center. It kind of centers it. I've got lots of wall fixtures here, so as long as it kind of centers it, I'm okay. And it goes inside the wood. That's up against the headstock. This is oak.
No,
this is just this is oak. It's oak with a piece of maple glued onto it. So this portion here, I never reuse. This is sacrificial. I keep cutting it off and gluing another piece on. If this gets too thin, I just face it off, glue another chunk on, turn it down, whatever shape I need. So right now it's a cone, so it fits in there on the headstock. I made this one just out of a piece of pine, spruce, just a tapered piece, and I threaded it 3/4 10 to fit on my tailstock. It roughly fits in the center there. Now both of these pieces of wood are going inside this coupler. So if I spin it on a lathe, it can't go anywhere because there's wood inside the wood. And I turn the outside. Round. And I've got a large set of jaws for my stronghold, so I put a groove around here, and I know that that groove now is perfectly centered on this wood. And so I take it off with this. It used to look like this. Once it looks like this on the outside, I can grab this with my big jaws. They're almost perfect circle because they're number 4 jaws on the stronghold. And now I can hold this perfectly centered and go ahead and hollow the inside. And then I'm going to put another mark like this right close to the edge on this end, and I'll turn it around in the chuck. Now I can hollow this side. And this is going to end up being a wall that's going to fit on a base like this for the quilters. So this piece here will be sitting on here with the slot in it. And that's just another design. And again, to put the slot in it, I use this jig, I'm holding it in the chuck. I mark it with a pencil where I want the slot to be, whatever angle I decided to. And rather than use a miter or a fence of some kind, this bandsaw jig's nice and flat. You work with your bandsaw, you got a pencil line, you just follow the line. And then the slot was about a 1/4 inch wide, so you just move over and follow your pencil line. Again, you only go down as deep as you want. You don't want to go too far where you'll have two pieces. And it cuts both sides at the same time. And my hands are nowhere near the blade. So that's those. So, by the way, I made a bunch of these because I know a lot of people here may not have taps to do it. These are 1" 8, and these are 3/4 10. So they'll fit on most MIDI lathes. I'm not sure what's your lathe got. Is it 1 1/4 or 1 inch?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's the the lathe from here. It's the larger one.
Yeah.
Is it 1 inch? Is it 1 1/4?
I don't know, but I would think it's probably.
Yeah.
How many people here have a one-way live center?
I have one.
Yeah, so this will fit on a one-way live center,
Yeah.
3/4 10. So I purposely brought these along as giveaways for people that want them. Take those. Making those is really simple. Of course, I've got a jig and a threading tool, so I thread my own. If you don't have that, you can. I had it here a minute ago. I had one that had a nut in it. I thought it did. Some people will embed a nut. Well, here it is. So back when I was brand new to turning, we went to a demo and somebody showed how they drilled a hole in it and they put a 3/4 inch nut and put it in there and epoxy it, and life is good. You know how much a 3/4 inch nut costs? How much does this cost? How much does this cost? I've probably got 20 minutes of time in this. Right? It didn't cost me nothing. It's exactly the same accuracy as this on a one-way live center. For wood turning, it's fantastic. But you can do it. If you want to buy a nut or you have a supply of nuts, bore a hole in, put the nut in, epoxy it, and then you can turn this on your headstock. I have a dead center Morris Taper 2 with threads on it from Robust. So I put it on there and I can turn whatever shape. If you've only got a one-way live center, you can put a pin through the live center, a short pin, and then tape it so the pin doesn't fly out. And then your live center is now a dead center, and you put that in your headstock and you can profile whatever you want on the face. And then when you take it out, put it in your tailstock, take the pin out, now you have a live center with a modified end.
Just for some of the beginners, you're talking about two threads that 1 inch number 8.
Yep.
Which is most lathes
All lathes.
have But if you've got a different lathe, you have to get a tap to fit your lathe.
Yep.
The other one, 3/4 10, is for the tailstock
Yes.
of several kinds of tailstocks. If you don't have one of those, you just have to drill a very small hole in your blank rather than for a 10-inch thread, and just use the live center point. It'll do exactly the same thing.
Exactly, yeah. Like this one here, or this one here. So if this was a live center, or yeah, a live center without threads, and a lot of them are, well, you just get a little piece of wood and you cut a bore hole in it that's just big enough to nicely slip over the end of your live center, and now you can do whatever you want with that piece of wood as well. So, I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. This little tool here is, by the way, is a screw chuck for making really, really small items. It's, yeah, I made mice. I made hundreds of mice with it. It's great for making chess sets. It's good for making light poles. But then again, it's a little piece of wood with a normal wood screw in it. And I designed this, and I had them made in Calgary when I lived in Calgary. So that's why I know more about that. It came from the original design came from the UK. The main differences between the UK model and my model is my model grabs onto a Robertson screw bit. The UK model squeezes the screws right on the screw. And if you put a mark on a wood screw on the shaft, it snaps real easy. But if you run a Robertson wood bit in there and then put a set screw on the wood bit, then there's no more stress on the screw, or a lot less stress. It works better. Somebody mentioned earlier about holding something that you didn't want to get marked. And I think you mentioned my name in that too. Yeah. So I've run into that so many times where I want to turn something, but it won't match my jaws. And I don't want to make it to match my jaws with a perfect circle and put a groove in it. I want to leave it just pure, flat, smooth. So I find out which piece of plastic will go around my workpiece, and then I'll fit it into which set of jaws I have. I have several chucks. So I've got 35 millimeter jaws, 50 millimeter jaws, 80 millimeter jaws, and I've got little pieces of plastic like this for each and every one of them. So that when I'm turning nested boxes all fit inside each other. Well, they're never a standard size, but they're always a little bit smaller than what my chuck jaws are. So I just put one of these inside the chuck jaws, and then I can hollow out the little nested box. It's only 2 inches deep and however big. But little piece of plastic and the jaws that you have, you can turn things as small as you want. Another little chuck that I've made specifically for a job is I needed to hold a piece of wood that size. I can't remember what size that was. I just had a piece of wood, needed to be that size. So I made this piece so that it was a slip fit on the piece of work I was trying to hold. And then I ran this through the bandsaw, and now I put this in my chuck, squeeze it, and actually this is the tenon side, squeeze this, it squeezes that wood just enough that it grabs the shaft, and now you can turn a finial. And that's what I was using it for, finials on birdhouse, miniature birdhouse boxes. And I needed some way to hold a little piece of wood that was going to go on there without marking it. I guess this has just got a little tenon on it. I think I brought that along just to say, look, this just fits in there and it'll grab that tenon and you can squeeze it. And so if I wanted to turn this piece of wood, I could turn it and do it. We were making boxes, beads of courage boxes or treasure life boxes. So I used bird mouth joinery. Like Ron, you and Bob, and oops. We did that demonstration or that video in your shop where we made all of these pieces and tried test rings, and we made the boxes, brackets and boxes. Well, when I got home, I glued up the rings were, I think, 6 inches long, the staves. But this is the test ring that we made, so that we could figure out what size it is. I glued it together. But now if I'm going to turn this here was not quite twice as long as this, but that configuration. And I needed to find a way to hold it. So I didn't have anything this big tapered. So I made these. It's a piece of plywood with a waste block on it. The waste block has a tenon on the outside so I can grab it with a chuck. It has a 3/4 10 thread on it so I can screw it onto my live center. Now there's two sides to a box. So I made two of them. And the same design. This I can grab with a chuck or I can screw it onto my live center. So now I have one for each side. I can put the box in between and I can safely turn the outside. Can't go anywhere because there's wood on the inside. And so I can safely turn it at a pretty good speed. I think I turned these at about 1,000 RPM. And this was fit in here. Now this looks like it's pretty loose. So first question that pops to mind is, how do you center it? I mean, every one of these, even though we cut these the same, and I glued them up, I thought I glued them up the same, they're all just a little different size, slightly different size on the inside. So I had to come up with a way to fix that. And this is a poor man's sizing tool. So this is really, really loose. This one used to be loose. Whoops. This one used to be loose. Now it's nice and solid. So it's centered close enough that I can take this out and make this round. Once this is round, I can put this in another jam chuck and grab it from the outside because I know it's perfectly round. And I can use this as support on the tailstock on both ends. And all I did to tighten up the fit, I had this in the lathe, and I just took a roll of masking tape and turned my lathe goes down really slow, so I just put it on here and just kept going round and round and round and try it until it fit. So there's only about a 1/16 of an inch of masking tape on this one. There's about an 1/8 of an inch of masking tape on this one. This is pretty cheap chuck.
The red green of Woodturners.
Yeah. So this is a smaller version of a jam chuck that I made. I actually had this bolted onto a faceplate so I can mount this on a chuck. And I take one of these boxes. Once it was turned, I cut a groove in here so that the box was turned so that when I put it in here, it fit inside this groove so that it can't move sideways and it's on center. And then I did the same thing with this ring. I cut a groove that matched the size of the box. I don't care what the box was, I just made this to fit the box. And then I bolted this together. Now I've got the box in there, the outside is turned perfectly smooth, finished, ready to go, and I'm able to hold it now and hollow the inside. And I hollow it about half to 3/4 of the way in, take this apart, spin the box around, clamp it back up, and now I can finish the bottom. So, and these are pretty cheap. This was scrap lumber, just pieces that are, and if you didn't have a big piece like this, you can make one by taking smaller pieces of plywood and crisscrossing them, glue them together. And you're not turning at speed, and you're not cranking it down super hard. You know, you turn to probably 600 RPM, and I use 3/8 bolts. I was making abacus. Does anybody know what an abacus is? It's a Chinese tool. It's got 10 bars on it, and there are 10 little things on 5 bars or 10 bars, however. There's my daughter-in-law is a school teacher, and she was teaching a grade 1 class, and she was asking about them, and I said, well, I think I could make some. Famous last words, and she needed 10. Well, it's 10 times 10 times how many pieces, like all these little pieces for each one of those. So I committed to making them, and then I had to come up with a way of making these damn beads. Making them all the same, like, or relatively the same. So with this little jig, I would take the piece of wood. These are little pieces of hole saw. I had some flooring, and I took a small diameter hole saw, and I just drilled out these little blanks out of a piece of flooring, right? Oak flooring. and I took these little pieces and I'd stack them on this little rod. This has got a chucking tenon on here. This screws into my live center, and it's got a hole in it. I took the center out of my live center, so it has a hole in it. This screws on, and it doesn't matter how thick these beads are, I just screw the live center in until this is tight, and I can turn 4 or 5 beads at a time, all exactly the same diameter. Work like a charm. Then I have it here. There's another jig to take it to the next step when you have to put, I wanted to put these fancy little coves on. And I don't see it here right now. But I have a little jig that's similar to this that fits in my one of my other chucks, and it I can grab, it's on Morse taper. I made a Morse taper mandrel that just fits this bead. And when it fits on the mandrel, the mount that's sticking out, I can just cut a cove and then turn it around and cut a cove. And they're all pretty much exactly the same, because the little pin that's in that chuck is just the length of this. So I've got a reference on what I'm cutting. It makes it really, really simple. I wish I had it. I know I had it in my hand when I was in the shop. I also had the jig for making a Morse taper too. Everybody knows what a Morse taper 2 is. That's the end of the tailstock or the live center, or a lot of the tools. This is a piece of wood that's cut to a Morse taper 2. To make this jig, I just screwed a piece of plywood on. I took my live center, laid it on the piece of wood, and screwed another piece of plywood to it. That's my Morse taper 2 taper jig. I don't use it much anymore because I've made so many of them that I found that I can do this with a spindle gouge, make a pass, stick it in the headstock. If it fits, I whack it with a hammer, good enough. But after a while, you get good at getting the angle pretty close. But when you're first making the first few, you cut a piece, you put an angle, and you put it on here. If it fits in here, it'll fit in your headstock. Stick it in, give it a whack, and you've got a real cheap drive. And you can have a big ball on the end of this with a Morse taper. You can have, you can basically put whatever you want on it. Well, this particular jig is a jig for making coffee mug stands. This pin is at 120 degrees. So when you want to put the coffee mug pins 120 degrees on center, just you can rotate piece of wood and stuff this. You drill the first hole, and you stuff this pin in the hole, and the next time you drill, it's going to be 120 degrees out. So you can go around a peg and hang your coffee mugs. So you can make all these tools yourself. You don't have to buy them. You can buy one of these. They'll probably charge you 40 or 50 bucks for it, but this cost me about an hour and a half of brain time, and probably, well, this is scrap wood, so it didn't cost me anything for wood. Here's another little jig I made for my bandsaw, because I don't want to lose my fingers. What I use this for is for making spinning tops. When I make a 2-piece spinning top, I use a 1/4-inch dowel for the spinner part on the top. When we were in Calgary, we were making spinning tops for what was the charity? The food bank. So we had a market table, and in front of the market table we had this big box of spinning tops, and it was donations or $2 a piece for spinning top, proceeds going to the food bank. So the guild in Calgary at that time said, well, we need to make a bunch of tops. So 3 or 4 of us got together and got a bunch of scrap wood from one of the spindle places, and we went to work making tops. Well, I made my tops 2-piece, and I needed a piece of wood to make the spinner. And every time I tried to put it through the bandsaw, the little pieces would be going flying all over hell. So I made a simple little jig, sits on my bandsaw. I run a piece of 1/4-inch rod into this hole until it sticks out, just sticks out on this plywood. And there's a slot here. You run it through, the bandsaw cuts the pin off, and you slide it through and cut the next one. They never go flying because they're captured in this plywood until the next one pushes it out. And when this little bin's full, you've got about 100 pins for 100 tops. At one afternoon, we made over 400 tops with 3 of us turning. So it's a simple jig.
Do you sleep at
Questions?
night? Do you sleep at night? Like
No,
you
I
do?
wake up in the middle of the night, I have a piece of paper, which is a great segue into my next
You
thing.
use your clipboard.
Underneath his pillow.
The most important tool you can have in a wood shop or wood turning shop is a notebook. If you get an idea, or at least with me, if I get an idea, if I don't write it down, I've got a perfectly clear memory. It's absolutely crystal clear. It's just really short. So if I get an idea, I'll make a note. And if I have an idea on a drawing, I'll make a sketch, because I guarantee you the next day I look at it, I'll wonder what the hell was I doing there? But I write something. So right on here, I did this, I'm going to put a date on this. Well, I remember doing this demonstration in Calgary probably 7 years ago.
Still in the drawing.
What does it say on there?
Making a drawing first helps you realize the pendant.
So this is a jig for making wooden pendants. And I had to write on here, make a drawing first. And I've got the drawing there, but every time I look at it, I now make a drawing. And I have to thank Bob again for reminding me, that's what I should be doing every time. So a notebook like this is the most important tool any woodworker, not just woodturner. Because when you get a really good idea, they're fleeting. Right? But if you write it down, you come back to it after a while and you're like, I remember that one, and you'll come up with a way of actually doing it. That's why I came up with all of this stuff. This didn't happen overnight. This stuff came over the last, about 15 years, and I didn't make them all at once. I would have a task, and then I'd try and figure out how to do it, and sometimes make jigs that ended up in the fire, because I don't want anybody to see them. They didn't work. But all of these, they all work. And safety is the most important thing. So, talking about jewelry, good segue into jewelry. This is a note about making pendants. Have you ever made wooden bracelets? I was in Utah at a symposium, and one of the demonstrators there made pendants, or made bracelets. So when you make a bracelet, you got to be able to finish it. And everybody's hands and wrists are different sizes. So I made these different sizes. This one's 2.5, this one's 2 3/4. I made them down, some of the grandkids are like 2 inches. So you just keep making, you make one of these to fit the ring that you're going to make. And this is really expensive wood. I think it's a 2x4. The most expensive part was probably the 50 cents for the nut, for the insert, and the little bolt. And these, I didn't have to even buy these because they came as a bunch of leftovers from some furniture. These furniture bolts, right? They were an Allen head cap screw type thing. So I didn't even have to buy them. And the beauty is you can make the ring however wide you want. Make these tenons to fit inside the ring that you're going to make. And you tighten them up, now you can polish the outside. Note turners is you hold the outside of the ring in a piece of plastic in a job to polish the inside. And then you turn it over and polish the other half. Now the inside's finished. Now how the hell do you finish the outside? You put it in a jig like this, drive it in and shut, and you can polish it to your heart's content. And like I say, you pick up ideas from anywhere and everywhere. Well, has anybody ever made a 2-piece mallet? Does anybody want to make a 2-piece mallet? So if you take that, make yourself a 2-piece mallet and bring it back for the next meeting. No, I don't.
Now you have to do the lead on it.
little jig, looks really simple. It's two pieces of wood screwed onto a little block. And in the center, there's a little square. And before I put that block on there, I drove the nails through it. And this thing was used for marking the center of my snowman. I made snowman jigs, I made snowmen for Christmas 2 or 3 years ago. At that time, my friends and family circle was about 35, so when we made snowman, I had to make at least 35. Then my granddaughter and her friend wanted to make some snowmen for their friends. So we had all this wood. So I made a jig so that we could find center. They put their snowmen between centers, and between the two of them, they made 14 each. So my granddaughter at that time was 9 years old, and her friend was 10 or 11. So they made all their Christmas ornaments, starting by, and they did all the work. I gave them the jig, told them what to do, they pounded it here, but they only made 2 snowmen and made metal. So a little jig really, really helps. It's easy to find center. It's just one way to do it. This is an angel template. When I made angels in Calgary for, I think I made 40 of them. So I made the first one. I thought, this is cool. Then I tried to make number 2. And it didn't look anything like the one. So I sat down for 5 minutes and I made myself a little template that has little filed grooves. The next jig I put on, I put a pencil in the groove, touched it to the wood, all these places. Every angel after that turned out, unless you put them side by side, you couldn't tell the difference. And even if you put them side by side, some of them are pretty damn close. After you make 25 or 30 of them, you'll be good at it. Any questions?
Back to your,
He's Kepler number 2.
back to your tailstock, 3/4 10.
Yeah.
How'd you tap it with?
Okay, I've got a deal 3/4 10. No, I've got a bottoming tap for 3/4 10. It's a metal machinist bottoming tap. When you get metal or when you get thread taps, they come in taper, plug, and plug. I'm a heavy-duty mechanic by trade, so I know a little bit about nuts and bolts. When you're tapping a hole, a tapered plug, a tapered tap gives you a tapered hole to get the threads nice and straight. You run that one through, then you take what they call a plug tap, and it has more threads on it, goes deeper in the hole. And then you go to a bottoming tap that has hardly any taper at all. It is designed to put threads all the way to the bottom of the one hole. Well, that's a one hole. So when I bought the tap, I went to the machine shop supply, and I bought a really good bottom 3/4 10 tap. It cost me an arm and a leg. So I bought that.
I'll stop you over there.
The one I bought cost me an arm and a leg.
I know, that's what I was going to get at. I rent equipment for 3/4 10 or bottom tap. The only ones that I could find did not have a centering hole on the drive end.
Mine does, that's why I went to the machine supply.
Right, but if you find one that doesn't have that centering hole, it's 1/4 of the price, okay? All you gotta do is weld a nut on the end of the tap, fill the hole, and then put that in your lathe. You can center a hole in that, that'll give you your centering hole. The reason for that centering hole is to keep the tap straight.
So when I tap these, I have this block chucked up on the headstock.
Right?
This is a big one, but I do the same thing. I have this chucked up on the headstock. I pour a little bit of a relief gold and I taper it. And then I turn my lathe off, unplug it. I lock the spindle on my lathe. If you can't lock the spindle, put a chuck wrench in your chuck and lean it up against your drill post. So when you're turning it, when you're tapping it, you're running the tap by hand. Put the tap in the hole started, you run your tailstock out into a little dimple, like a dimple on the end of the tap. That keeps the tap perfectly centered in line with the hole. And then you take a wrench and turn the tap in. You have to chase it with the tailstock as you're turning the threads in. But again, when I bought my bottoming tap, I wanted to have one of the hole in it It cost me $72 for a bottoming plant. But I bought that 10 years ago, and I must have tried 100 of these. Every time I need one, I don't even think twice anymore. I just grab a piece of wood, drill it 7/8 or drill it 5/8 and tap it. And if I'm doing glue blocks, I'll tap it right through. Then I just put glue blocks on. I don't have to worry about the bottoming part. And the most important part is, once you got the threads, this one here has got a glue block glued onto here. Once you have this piece threaded, you just keep gluing new pieces on. The glue is stronger than the wood, so you glue another piece on, shape it the way you want. Questions? This is also for Mike Huslock. Mike Huslock turns spatulas. This is a Mike Huslock spatula shop. He cuts the spatulas on a bandsaw so that they'll fit in here on one end. Sticks it in here, puts the tailstock against the small end. 30 seconds later, you got a spatula. It gets really slick. I think I made 2 spatulas. It's another idea. Questions? Comments? This is the jig I was using for these, hold this in my chuck. This little relief here gets me away from the chuck so I don't have to worry about my fingers. The length of this little pin fits in the hole and it gives me a reference of how far back the cut goes. And it's a piece of wood. This can be whatever size I need it to be, because I can match it to the hole with the beads I made. Has anybody made eggs? You make an egg, you can hold an egg on one end, turn the egg perfectly, get it all nice and smooth and finished, and you still got to part the egg off. So once you part the egg off, you got the little nubbin on the end. How do you do that? Well, this is a band clamp piece of, this happens to be maple, but it can be any kind of wood, end grain. You cut band slots in it, and this is long enough that this can go in and out. Just jam the egg in there, tighten up the band clamp, and now you can polish the end of the egg perfectly smooth. I mean, how much does that cost? A little piece of scrap.
The hose clamp is the most expensive part.
Yeah, the hose clamp is the most expensive part. The most important part of one of these, you take the band clamp, there's still enough spring in the wood, it's holding that egg pretty damn slick, and you've just finished polishing it, so you got nothing to grab onto. So you make sure you do one of these.
Yeah, you got it, yeah.
And then you take your knockoff bar and knock it out, you know. Don't ask me how I know that. Yeah. Old too soon, not too late. Yeah, and I think that's about it for the jigs that I've got here. Oh, this little tool here. Wire burner. Little piece of piano wire. 2 little pieces of wood. And it's great for making marks on wood. You spin this on the lathe. You take a point tool or a skew, put a little V-groove in. And when this is spinning, you make sure that you only grab these with your fingers. You never grab them really tight. You grab them so that if the wood wants to grab it, it'll pull it out of your hands real easy. And you hold it down across the wood with the lathe spinning. And when you've got an adequate amount of smoke that you can hardly see yourself anymore, then you stop burning. Or sooner.
And don't touch the wire.
Don't touch the wire.
More than once.
It will get red hot. Yeah. It'll get really, really hot. Who wants one of these? Here, come on, get it.
So
Don't hurt yourself.
I parted my bowl, you know this, so I took my bowl and I parted it, and I wanted to burn it, and I didn't have a tool, so I took a knife and I heated the knife up, and then put the knife around and burnt it that way.
And it worked.
It worked, but when I went to your place, you basically showed me, okay, you can use this other tool to burn the
You
wood.
could use a knife too, just hold it against the wood, it'll heat up by itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I've got some of these blocks. Anybody need a 1-inch 8 and a 3/4 10?
Okay.
Got 2 more.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
So if anybody else needs some of those, or you need some tap, give me a shout. You can drop by the lathe. We can make some. They don't take very long to make. If you got a block of wood, just give me a shout and we'll set up a time. And
Bert, one more thing. I was talking to a person telling him about putting that 1-inch number, 3/4 thread in there. And I forgot to tell him a very important thing. The drill hole that you put in is smaller.
yes, for a 3/4 10, it takes a 5/8 drill.
2132.
Well, 5/8 is what they say for wood.
Close enough.
Yeah, but I mean, 5/8 drill will give you enough of an opening in wood to run my 3/4 inch 10 tap in. And if you really want to get the threads really, really nice, once you run the tap in the first time, take some thin CA and spread it in the threads, roll it around so the CA gets in there, stabilize it or accelerate it, so now it's plastic. Then you run the tap in again and it cuts the plastic. So it gives you a stronger thread. They'll last a little longer. I don't worry about it anymore because I just make a new one if I need it. But some of these I've had for, well, this one I've had for probably 7-8 years. It's made out of oak, and I've got the CA treatment on this one. And the threads in it today are just like it was when I made it. And I use this a lot. I even had to put a hole in here for getting it off because if you get it on there jammed too tight, you need some way to get it off, so I drilled a hole for the Tommy bar to get it off. And that's about all I got.
Oh.
That's
all? Impressive.
Well, this is all I got tonight. I got another box bigger than this at home, but I just brought the things that fit in this box.
You want to see everything he's got, you're going to take 2 weeks vacation.
Hey, well, you got to be careful because I didn't do it with Melanie, but I should have. Anybody that comes into my shop, I usually tie a string on them. Because I had 2 people come last week, I haven't swept the floor, I still haven't found them. Well, one last thing, this is a little prop I use for making segments. And for people that make segments, they know all about this. I run a piece of tape upside down on here, and then I lay my segments on off my wedgie sled, and when I got the one I use is about that long. But you put all these wedges on, and then you roll them into a circle and tape them together. It just makes it so easy to make a ring. But the important thing is with a wedgie sled, all of the angles are perfect. If you don't have a wedgie sled, then you might not get them perfect. And once you get it perfect, then making these rings is like 4 hours, and you've got all the rings made for that. And they're easy to glue up. And make sure you put some of this kind of tuck tape on. That's a time saver. Otherwise, you'll stick your ring to the wood, and it's risky to get off. Anyway, that's all I got. That's all I got.
Bert, thanks a lot. It was fantastic.
I'm just hoping that everybody got a chance to get something out of it, because I had fun doing it, but I want to know whether if you had that fun. And I can't express the safety aspect of it enough. I mean, everything I've shown here, I tried to make it so the tools that are here, you can use, because they're fitting wood inside of wood, it's not going to fly off the lathe, or you have a better chance of it. Anything can happen with wood turning. Anything can happen to anybody. But safety first. To make sure that you look after your number one. Wear a face shield, stand out of the line of fire. And if anybody wants to know what a face shield to do, watch my Oops video. I think it's on Edmonton Woodturners, and I think it's also on East Slope Woodturning. And it's actually went viral. It's gone overseas as well. I was turning something and I made a major faux pas. So watch the video. It'll open your eyes.